All right, hello. So, tis I again, recording this instead of streaming because it seems that despite doing this for a few years, Mixer has decided to reset the requirements to actually begin streaming, meaning that now you need to basically get reauthorized to allow them to let you stream. So now I have to wait 24 hours for a stream key, so this is just recorded in the meantime, which is not nearly as fun for me, but at least does give me more incentive to actually edit and post this on YouTube. In any case, if it has not been obvious, I have not streamed, I think, for probably consistently for like 3 weeks a month on Xbox, because I have had my brother being busy with getting back to school now that his summer paid internship was finished, and as he moved back, it looks like he kind of ruined his Xbox. It will no longer load games, so he hasn't been on. So I haven't been playing Xbox with him, so I haven't been playing Xbox with anybody. I also did buy Gloomhaven. um, 4, 5, 6 months ago, a while ago, the board game, not the digital version. And I have been basically binge playing that. I did buy it to play it with my classmates, but they have stopped having an interest in playing the game, despite me having a really great one still. So, yeah, I've been playing that solo since I've been on break here for a week or so. And I've just been playing Gloomhaven every night. So what I want to talk about today, and I was actually inspired by the Tinkerheart guide that I read last night. If you literally just Google Tinkerheart Gloomhaven, it'll pull up the Imager guide for it. Quite humorous. Probably one of the most entertaining things I've read from a like guide perspective ever. That wasn't like overly trying to be funny when it wasn't. It was absolutely quite funny, and it kind of brought me to a conclusion that, you know what, I kind of wanted to share what I've done with my build for the Quattral Tinkerer in Gloomhaven, because it's a bit different from what most people have done. It's not necessarily a good build, but it's one I've been having fun with. So just a little bit of background on the Tinkerer, which is a medium health character. So at level 9 it has a whopping 20 health, and I know the camera's having problems focusing, so apologies for that. Let's see if I can fake it out to kind of. So basically I currently have my webcam mounted 90 degrees on the lid of my laptop, pointing down on the keyboard, as you can see, just because it's a little bit more convenient as a flat surface for me to place cards. It doesn't require me to hold them perfectly steady for the camera to focus on them the entire time. So, yeah, as far as the Tinkerer, so I actually heard about Gloomhaven the first time because, as I'm sure people are aware if they know me, I don't really go out much. I don't really go out and seek anything exciting, which of course is a strike against me for adventurism. But anyway, I came across Gloomhaven because as a video game art and design student, we were discussing games and difficulty, and our instructor decided as a class project what she'd do is she'd bring in Gloomhaven, which is this game. If you aren't familiar with it, it's a turn-based kind of. It's kind of like Dungeons and Dragons, but not. It doesn't lean as heavily on the narrative RPG aspect, from my understanding. And I haven't played the latter, so I can't really attest to the comparison between it. But my understanding is it's a less heavy narrative lore RPG-esque game. So it is still tabletop. It's like 10 kilograms. It comes in an absolutely enormous box, which I'd show if it didn't take me like 10 minutes to set up the camera right now so it doesn't fall over. And basically you have a bunch of character minis with mats. They come with a deck of cards of varying amounts. And you are basically sent through to do tasks, what are called scenarios. Basically, it's a dungeon crawler, really. So you have your missions. We'll have to go through rooms and kill a bunch of baddies. Very interesting game. I'm probably not doing it justice with my explanation, but in any case, the class that I chose, that I was assigned somewhat, but chose, was the Tinkerer, which if you take a look at the class emblem there, very much what you'd expect to be a gadgetier person, and I've always kind of been interested in that. I always found it a shame in Bethesda's Elder Scrolls V Skyrim that the Dwemer weren't expanded on further, that we didn't really get a chance to play with contraptions and whatnot. And I actually, when I played Skyrim, I actually downloaded a couple of mods on PC explicitly to be able to have more of that gadgeteer lifestyle. So I've always been very interested in that. And so the Tinkerer was kind of an obvious choice because, well, from what I was told, it's a gadgeteer person. So, very interested in that. Turns out it's actually, of the starting 6 characters, it's actually the bottomer, it's the medic. And my team absolutely refused to, my classmates absolutely refused to listen to my suggestions or whatnot, like from playing a lot of strategy games. So people would just run in and get hit a lot. And then I would have to go and try and waddle up to them and then heal them. It wasn't a great time, but very interested still in the Tinkerer aspect, just not as the medic. So I am now sitting here at, just place that there. So I'm now sitting there as a level 9 Tinkerer, and my other party members are as such. And this isn't going to make sense for a whole lot of people who are not familiar with Gloomhaven, but the people who are familiar with Gloomhaven are going to understand what these character boxes represent and understand the party composition of what I have. Oops. So these are these 4 boxes here, not the middle one. Not the middle one, but these 4 are locked character classes, so they aren't available from the start. Technically, you could open them, play with them, look at them, read up online about them if you wanted to. But Isaac Childress has requested on the Board Game Geek forums and on the Reddit not to spoil locked content like this for new players. So these classes do have spoiler-free names, which are based off of their emblems. So this is the sun, this is the circles, or Ubisoft. I'm a big fan of the latter name as a fan of the company. And then kind of spoilery in itself, but I guess accurate, 2 mini. So as you can see, there's 2 boxes, and each of these boxes hold the character figurines, so you can kind of infer from there. In any case, what I have with this party is I have fairly strong melee capabilities with these 2 characters, with the 3 character boxes, but 2 classes. And then I also have a bit of crowd control, a bit of range damage with this 3rd class, but not nearly enough. So, what I've done with our good friend the Tinkerer is I've decided to follow a completely damage-based class. So, just trying to think how I want to do this. Probably the easiest way is I'm just going to show the, sorry, I totally didn't think to actually separate this stuff ahead of time. That would have been smart. So just to show the level 1 cards for what you have for options, which I understand once again is going to absolutely suck with the camera focus or lack thereof. But just to give you semblance of the cards that you start with and kind of my process for leveling up, choosing the cards I took, why I chose them, of course, and what I regret about the choices that I have now made. Yeah, I think that'll probably be the best way. So there's going to be spoilers for this class, for the Tinkerer. So technically none of it is spoilered because according to Isaac, the game creator and designer, that's probably a good thing to preface his name with. The first 6 classes, so the Tinkerer, the Brute, the Scoundrel, the Mind Thief, the Spellweaver, and the Cragheart. None of those are technically spoilery because they are open information. He does consider them open information. By that logic, I guess if I was smart, I would consider any class I've unlocked to be open information, but I really enjoy not knowing what the cards are every level. When you level up, you have the choice of 1 or 2 cards, and I enjoy not knowing what those cards are ahead of time. But that also does a bit of a disservice because then I'm making like blind decisions about builds that next level may be completely reversed with the other card choice. But in any case, so for the starting cards, we have... Oh, that glare is awful. Okay, so we have Energizing Tonic there. Low initiative, lower numbers, faster in the round. So it's a double loss. You have heal on top, you have move on the bottom. I guess the question is how far I should go in depth on this information, because people who might be watching might, I don't know, like I have, I think, 103 followers, and out of that, 99 are people who like dropped in and are like, yeah, follow for follow, and then dipped and have never been back, and the other 4 are people who might actually be interested in this, assuming I ever post this to YouTube. Basically, when you play the game, you choose 2 cards, so let's just go with these 2. You choose 2 cards to play. You at the beginning of the round, you choose from your deck. So in this case, the Tinker has 12 cards they can play with, which is the most cards of the starting class. You choose 1 card to use as your initiative value, so basically how quickly or slowly you're acting in the round. I don't think you can technically go 0, so from 0-1 to 99. And then when all cards have been revealed by all party members, then the cards are also drawn for the monsters, and then you act in initiative order. So to play your turn, you do a top action and a bottom action, so you can do any of the things listed on the cards. So you could do a heal 5 at a range of 2, and then you could do 1 ally within range 2 may recover one of their discarded cards. If you consume ice, you get 2 discarded cards. So that would be a legitimate combination. You could create 1 2 damage poison trap in an adjacent empty hex, and then move 6 instead. So 1 bottom, 1 top, 1 bottom, 1 top. Alternatively, you can use the default actions. So you can use a attack 2, then a move 2, or an attack 2, move 2. And that's basically the round. You play it out. You discard these guys if they have no symbol. If they are lost, basically means they're one-time use. So this would actually go into your lost pile. And you'd still have, this is how I laid out in any case, you have your deck, your discard, and your lost pile, and then every round you're going to play. Obviously you're not going to pick at random, or at least I hope you aren't going to. You're going to play 2 cards, and then if you use the loss effect, then you're going to put it in your lost pile, and if you use the regular effect, say I just attacked for 2 on the top, the basic action, I put in my discard, right? And then you can do this rest actions to gain your cards back, right? So, actually, let me see if I can turn off that. There we go. Now I don't move the mouse all over the cursor when I put cards down. So that's the basics of how to play it. Very, 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 very low level. I did say, I was correct in saying that you have 12 cards. I actually am holding 15 cards in my hand right now. We'll get to that. But to go over the starting cards available to you as a level 1 Quattro Tinkerer, new to the world and probably the game, you have the following 12 options. And once again, I know I'm sorry about the cards. Sorry, 15 options. And not all of these are going to fit because of where the camera's positioned. So I'm going to have to do this a few different ways. But I'm just going to show the first 8 out of 15. 8 out of 15 to begin with. So these are from, I'm displaying these all from low initiative, so really fast in the round, to slow in order of level. So these are the level 1 cards, and then I'm going to show the rest of the level 1 cards, the slower ones, and then the level X cards, which are going to have a different smattering of initiatives. So your level X cards are basically your alternative cards. You can use them at level 1, you can use them at level 9, whatever. They're basically more niche, more unique, kind of more difficult to use. So the first time you play the game, they recommend, Isaac recommends that you just use the 12 cards, the level 1 cards. Then after that, if you are more familiar or comfortable with the game, you can maybe go and poke around with the X abilities a bit. So what we have here, like I said, basically the Tinkerer is the medic. Notably, though, you do have some CC effects, some crowd control effects, which are quite interesting. So applying debuffs to enemies primarily. You do have a couple of support options for your team. You have a couple of options for buffing your team. But primarily you have your medic abilities, so heal, heal, heal. You have support abilities, so increase damage, shield teammates, recover their discarded cards so they don't have to do a rest. And then you have kind of your third type of playstyle in the Tinkerer deck, which is basically I'd call it an assault playstyle. And this is what I'm actually interested in doing, is having an assault Tinkerer, as funny as it sounds, because you do have a large hand size. You have very few repeatable attacks, so one of which is, for instance, Toxic Bolt. There you do have the attack 2, range of 3, poison them, infuse earth, which is for a low level card. But then you have these multi-hex, multi-damage cards. They tend to apply a debuff, so wound or immobilize. They tend to give you a fair amount of EXP, but they are lost, which means you can only do them once, other than if you use recover actions, or rather, sorry, if other players use recover actions on you. Like there's a version for this which you can recover a lost card. So if somebody else has one, they can play that on you, and then you can maybe use Net Shooter or Flamethrower again. So yeah, that's the build I'm more interested in going with. Just because you do have a large hand size, you can get away with using a lot of these fairly heavy-hitting lost cards. And I say fairly because they're very positioning dependent. If you can hit 3 people for 3 damage, that's 9 damage, and then you can wound them, which is effectively 12 damage if they all live one more round and then hopefully die. But it's a decent amount of damage if all the enemies are there. Otherwise, it's okay. If you hit 2 people with it, hit them for 6 damage for a loss, that's okay at level 1. Applying effects to them is always a positive, of course, for your team. But they're not fantastic, and your repeatable attacks are very, very middle of the road. So you have a 3 for 3, which is a very slow initiative as far as most monsters are concerned. You have a 2 with poison, you have a 1 with stun. So once again, kind of more so a crowd control build than a pure damage, but I'm looking to make it pure damage. So what we're going to do is I'm going to just take off the cards here that I personally don't use in the build, or wouldn't recommend. And we'll go from there. And as I say that, I realize that I'm probably going to take away cards and then put them back, because I'm going through this with the knowledge not of my level 1 build, but of my max level build. So I will attempt to keep in mind like which cards to get rid of. So first off, we're going to get rid of the double loss, which is a heal high move, because honestly, healing is not what I want to do, and double losses are generally considered quite poor, because either you have to use one effect and then not the other, or when you're playing them, you're just using them for the basic move to attack to. Ideally, you'll have a powerful loss, so say for instance that guy, with a pretty useful, spammable, non-loss ability. So like the Toxic Bolt is a fantastic example of that, because you can act very early in the round and keep attacking, poisoning, and then when you need to deal that extra damage in a little bit shorter radius. So additionally, we're going to get rid of this second medic card. Going to get rid of the support card. And then we're just going to move Flamethrower up. Once again, just trying to keep these in initiative order. So so these 5 ones we're going to keep. We're going to hold on to for now. So I'm just going to take them off the board here so we can put the other 7 on. I've only chosen 5, so technically I'd need to take all 7 of these ones if I did continue with it, but I didn't. So I'm just going to show you kind of the process that I took to get to max level, and then kind of like my insights on that. So additionally, we have Proximity Mine. Once again, I know Glaire's quite bad. Basically, you create a 6 damage trap, and then you gain 2 EXP when the trap is sprung. So it's true damage, which is interesting. It doesn't say attack the enemy, it says deal 6 damage. So if they have high shield, normally they would ignore a high damage attack. If they have 3 shields, you attack them for 6. 3 damage would be blocked by the shield, and they take 3 damage. But this is interesting because it's not an attack, it's just deal 6 damage. So they'll just take that damage even if they have high shield. Additionally, we have hook gun. People like to hate on this gun. I absolutely love it because you can attack enemies, pull them closer to you for your melee companions to deal with, or help set up next turn for you to be able to hit a bunch of enemies at once. If they're kind of spread out, then you can group them up with this and then attack them, deal a lot of damage. Additionally, you do have a loot too, so the game uses a hex grid, so your character occupies 1 hex. Any melee attacks can attack a adjacent hex, so 6 tiles adjacent to you. And then after that, you have your ranged attacks. Loot 2 means that you can loot all treasure or gold drops in 2 tiles away from you, so that's technically your tile where you are if you haven't picked up the coin on it. The 6 tiles adjacent to you, and then the, oh god, I don't even know how, what is it, 12 tiles? In a second layer around your character. So this is going to be hilarious, but I'm going to use the keyboard for an example. So if I were here and I had a melee attack, I could hit any 6 of these tiles, right? And if I had a ranged attack, I could hit here or 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 here. If there was another tile here, that would work, or another tile here, that would work, or another tile here, that would work. But with a loot, I can loot here, these 6, and then the outer radius, the second ring around that, which is a lot of loot if there's a lot of money on the ground. But I don't use it very much, actually. I've completed two scenarios, 74 and 93, which are both about treasure ships. And my character is still broke. I only have 1 gold with him currently, and I have more things that I want to buy, and I'm still broke with them as a level 9 playing through a lot of scenarios. And it's funny because most people say, once you get to level 5, 6, you start buying enhancements for your characters, so you add stickers to these dots to make them more effective, add different effects. But I haven't because my character is very poor and enhancing is expensive. In any case, next we have our decoy, which is nice. It's basically a meat shield that also heals. Ink Bomb, which is our most powerful level 1 card, deals potentially 12 damage. Not much else to say for that. Then we have your X cards, which are your alternative playstyle ones. So you have a multi-attack, low damage on the top, loss heal on the bottom. You have Potent Potables, which is just a move 3 on the bottom, which is kind of funny because most of the moves as this class are move 4s. But then on the top, every time you heal for an additional 2 health for the next 4 actions. And then we have Volatile Concoction, which is quite interesting. It's our second trap card available, and it is a poison trap, although lower damage too. But the bottom is a nice support ability. A teammate may recover one of their discarded cards, so that's nice for that effect. So as for what I believe I took with my first level build, I know I didn't, once again, I wanted to stay away from healing. I did keep the decoy, which is one of the things that I regret. But I believe we went with these 6, and then additionally we added back in Invigorating Elixir, which is another support ability, where, once again, your allies recover all their cards. So that leaves me with 3 cards left over. Yeah, so that would be the first level build I took. And you know what, thinking about it, it's probably easier for me to just say what I replace rather than my insights on every level, because it's going to get quite lengthy of a video. So now I'm just going to organize these by actual true initiative. Now that they are in the hand size, we're going to ignore, oh hey, this is an X card. And you know what, I think I can probably fit everything. If I'm smart about it. maybe it might just not fit, but so you can see the card name of the bottom row. So you basically have 2.5, and I know the camera's fuzzy. It doesn't really help the situation at all, but I don't know what to say. Basically, deal with it. I guess I don't know how to make this better without anchoring the camera to a wall somehow so it can look on the table, or having it look all the way down here below the laptop. But then you wouldn't see the cards because they're too far away. But in any case, this is our first level. So we have a nice few effects here. We have your Ink Bomb, Flamethrower, Net Shooter, that are your loss group attacks. You have a couple of CC abilities, your Stun, your Wound and Immobilize with Net Shooter and Flamethrower, and your Poison. And then you have a couple of heavier hitting attacks. You have your Proximity Mine if you can convince an enemy to go in on it or pull them onto it. And then you have your Loss attack for Toxic Bolt as well. So a nice little bit of variation there. Then next level, we have the choice of a Disorienting Flash. What is that? I'm just going to put these kind of jagged so you can kind of see them against the back cards. So we have Disorienting Flash and Stamina Booster. And Disorienting Flash is basically designed to be an upgrade to Stun Shot. It's a multi-target, but it's loss, which means that is not great at all, really. It's not. And another class has, as has been pointed out in a few other guides, multiple other classes have attacks that are 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 hexes that are stun and loss, so not all things are equal in this world. So in any case, what I chose to go with, I was still going with a support build rather than a pure aggressive build with the Tinker at this point, so I actually chose to go with the Stamina Booster. Because it allows a teammate to recover a lost card, which all things considered is pretty neat. So as for what I got rid of, I believe at this point I got rid of, it was Volatile Concoction or Proximity Mine, and I was playing around with them a lot, kind of mixing and matching, trying to get things to work. I did also pull out Harmless Contraption at one point. For the sake of this actual quote-unquote guide, if we're going with only support or damage and not really concerned with healing, I would probably replace Harmless Contraption, because Volatile Concoction does give you the ability to do another recover, and Proximity Mine is true damage, which is arguably more important than a meat shield. So we're going to pull that card out, and we're just going to bump. Oh, goodness. Yeah, I'm sorry. Like I said, this is not a good system. I'm aware of that. So we got that, and I'll be talking more about combos once we get to the end, and then you can kind of infer from there the lower level combos. So looking at the level 3 cards, we have in my opinion, a very juicy Crank Bow, which is an attack 6, range 5, or move 4 on the bottom. And then we also have a Tinkerer's Tools, which is a create a stun trap, disarm 1 trap. Now, at this point, I wasn't set on a damage build, so having Crank Bow as a loss attack 6 is pretty decent, I'll give you that, especially against high-level enemies, but it's an attack 6 where we already have 2 attack 9s and an attack 12 if we get all the enemies lined up. And that's generally what I was doing. I was waiting for the enemies to line up to actually give me, a reason to use Ink Bomb, Net Shooter, Flamethrower. I wasn't using it on 2 targets. I wasn't getting 6 or 8 damage out of it. I was getting the full 9 or 12. And generally I could get away with that with party comp at the time, because if I didn't kill them, some other character could. So what I went with was Tinkerer's Tools. Now, I don't recall what I actually replaced with this one. I believe, with hindsight, the best option would probably be the Proximity Mine at this point, because it's a non-loss, obviously. So I'm just going to go with that. Now it's not in order, but I'm not going to try and shuffle around all the cards every time. That's going to get very annoying for viewing purposes, I'm sure. So our next level is another interesting one because we actually get another summon. Get our battle bot, which is basically the decoy, but it also attacks for 2. Or we can go with microbots, which is a move and then loot on the bottom and then a loss heal on top. So once again, as mentioned, double losses are not super great. Even at this level, I know that I can tell you I did not pick that one. I picked Dangerous Contraption because it's, once again, I thought, oh man, traps and bots are pretty dope, and I came to a conclusion very, very later on that they actually aren't, unfortunately. But yeah, I went with Dangerous Contraption at the time. Now this is a straight upgrade to your Harmless Contraption, your decoy, but we already got rid of the decoy. So at this point, you'd replace, I don't know, probably, I believe I got rid of Reviving Shocks at this point. Once again, this is, I'm not working with 100% hindsight here. Unfortunately, I didn't think to actually track this stuff. It was a very iterative process. In any case, now we hit level 5, and this is where things get pretty juicy. We have the option of our Disintegration Beam, which will kill all enemies in the targeted area whose current health is less than 5. Bottom is a move and then disarm. And then Noxious Vials, where you can refresh a consumed bag item of an ally, or you can do another 3-hex AoE on the bottom, this time poison. And because it is on the bottom, you can use it and then combo it with Ink Bomb to do 3 damage to each of them, and then 4 plus poison, 5 damage. So a lot of damage. And once again, with hindsight, I probably would have gone with my same choice for the first time, which is Disintegration Beam, because just immediately killing enemies with 5 health, especially if they have really, really high shields, they tend to have low health, which means that you can kill them at full health with Disintegration Beam, 2 or 3 of them at once, which is just great. And the bottom is a Disarm, which is basically a poor man's stun. Stun skips their turn. Disarm prevents them from attacking, and for most characters, having them not attack is effectively going to give you the same results as them being stunned. So definitely Disintegration Beam is the way to go. Now at this point is where my suggestions are kind of going to go to the wayside, because now I'm acting from the viewpoint of my final goal, looking back on this selection process, rather than actually being like, well, this is the card we want to take because it's in line with the build. This is the cards we want to get rid of because it's in line with the build. Now, I did still use Tinkerer's Tool at this level, but not very much. It was an optional swap out a lot of the times, so I'm just going to say that we're replacing that with the Disintegration Beam, or at least for what I did. Yeah. Now we're going to hit level 6. Now this was interesting for me because we have another trap, which is deal 4 damage and muddle, or recover 4 allies' cards over 4 turns, or 1 ally's card each turn over 4 turns, or a perform attack 2 range 5 action for the next 5 turns, or heal on the bottom. Now, at this stage, I was realizing that traps are not great, because at this point my credit card had retired, so moving enemies was very difficult other than with the hook gun. And a support build wasn't really great either. So I actually went back at this point and I chose the crank gun, which is that attack 6, just because it's a little bit higher DPS on a single target. And because I was starting to phase out traps and whatnot, I did get rid of Volatile Concoction at this point. I do know that for sure. And it's kind of funny because looking at it, Auto Turret actually does more damage. It's that attack 10 over 5 turns because you're doing an attack 2 times 5. But I didn't really want the heal and I wanted the additional movement. So we actually, or at least I actually, didn't choose either of those level 6 cards. Alright, now we're going to move on to level 7 here, and this is where you get probably one of the easiest choices so far. Now that I had a damage build in mind, you have a move 2, heal 2, move 2, heal 2, or on the bottom a heal 2 for 4, or we can summon a better bot that has 6 health, 3 move, 3 damage, which is okay, because once again at this point I was saying, well, the bots are bad. Or you could do an attack 4 on a bot, which is not great card in general, especially at level 7, but for the Tinker, it's pretty great. So I went with the Murderous Contraption hand down, and I just replaced the Dangerous Contraption most of the time. I did sometimes swap it out for the for Stamina Booster, Reinvigorating Elixir, but in any case, once again, you don't really have a whole lot of other good damage card choices at this point. Like the only one we got rid of that we might use is Reviving Shocks, which is the multi-target. So that was our level 7. Level 8 was another interesting one, just like level 6, because I'm basically trying to backpedal on my build here now. So despite having the option of doing attack 9, suffer 2 damage, or all adjacent allies add 2 attack to their attacks this round, all adjacent allies suffer 2 damage, or you can make all summon allies move 3, or sorry, all summon allies within range 3 may perform a move plus 2, so whatever their base is, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, whatever, plus 2 with you controlling it, or a move 8 with jump. So pretty interesting, but like I said, at this point I was still backpedaling on making a damage build. So I actually chose Noxious Vials at this point, the attack on the bottom with the refresh consume bag item on top. So with this, at this point I believe I replaced Reinvigorating Elixir and Stamina Booster. So I got rid of the 2 card refreshes, and then I put in the Battle Bot again, because that gave me a little bit more movement, as well as the ability to theoretically summon another Meat Shield if I absolutely needed to. Now that was our level 8 cards that we both ignored, both of which we ignored. So going into level 9, the last level, we have another couple of interesting options. We have Chimeric Formula, which is like the breaker of game balance card. So an adjacent ally may recover up to 2 of their lost cards, then lose 2 cards. So basically it's a loss cycle, which is great if they purposefully or have to lose due to damage like 2 good cards, or they actually spend them. Then you can say, okay, well, you can take those 2 back, and then you can put 2 of your most garbage cards in your lost pile instead. So that's interesting by itself. But it's not the game-breaking one. The bottom one is, so 1 ally within range 3 may recover 1 lost card belonging to an ally adjacent to them. So even as Isaac says, you're level 9, just go crazy. You know, if you want your Brute to now have a Mind Thief augment, so all of their attacks deal additional damage, or you know, anything silly like that, you can do that. Any ally can recover any other ally's card as long as it doesn't have the lost unrecoverable symbol on it, which is... oh my god, I'm trying to hold it upside down even though I just did the camera for that. Oh, look, now it's focusing. That's funny. Anyway, so that symbol there in the bottom right with the no deck sign means that you can't recover this card, which is understandable as a, hey, you can recover a lost card. But that means you can't recover a couple of very powerful cards like the Spellweaver. Spellweaver has a lost card that recovers all the rest of her lost cards, which gives her good endurance in the game, because by default she only has 8 cards, so and a lot of them are lost cards, so she doesn't last very long. So you can't cause somebody else to recover that because it has that same symbol, the lost unrecoverable. Interestingly though, Chimeric Formula itself doesn't. So once again, if you have an ally that can recover cards, you can actually get this back and then recover another card for somebody else. So you could actually put, for instance, like have 2 Mind Thief augments on the Brute if you really wanted anything like that. Now the other option, and this is the one that I went with, was an Execute. You kill an adjacent normal or elite enemy, or you can move 4 and then poison them. So very big fan of killing enemies without actually having to do any damage or work to them. I did have another class, the Handsaw class. They have a couple of executions which are really good, but they're situational. I absolutely love Saw class. If I do continue making guides, I am 100% going to make one about them next. But I went with Lethal Injection, and at this point, I believe once again I just got rid of the Dangerous Contraption. So if I organize this by initiative here, which is it's not a great speedy deck by any means. As one of my classmates would say, this is a very slow going class, especially when you have all these heavy hitting attacks. But you do have, a little bit of flexibility now. At higher levels, you can recover some cards with items, and additionally, you have, of course, a little bit more health to soak some damage if you do go a little bit slower in the round. So these are the cards I currently have in my hand when I play the Tinkerer. Now, because I have hit the quote-unquote level 10, that's at, level 10 isn't actually a level. If you look at this card here, let's see if it focuses, come on. Yeah, so level 9 is the highest at 500 EXP, but if you note, going from level 1 to 2 is 45 EXP, 2 to 3 is 50, 3 to 4 is 55, etc. Level 10, quote-unquote, is at 85 EXP, and some people make that so that you can instantly retire if you haven't completed your personal quest yet for the character. So for instance, mine is kill 8 forest tombs. I've only killed 3 because I run across none of them. So some people say, oh, you automatically retire or whatnot at that point. I'm not a big fan of the only choose one card per level system, because then I'm sitting here at the end looking at a deck like this. I'm like, you know what would be better? Probably having chosen not Stamina Booster or Disorienting Flash when I leveled up. I didn't choose Disorienting Flash, but not choosing to not go with Stamina Booster or Dangerous Contraption because effectively I didn't use either of them, or Tinkerer's Tools. Didn't really use any of them here as we got to the end. But of course, it does give you a bit of meaningful choice, debatably giving you meaningful choice, but I feel like it makes it frustrating because, once again, if you try not to spoil things for yourself, then you're going through the game making these decisions, and then 2 or 3 levels later you find out, oh, you know what, I can't really not have a damage Tinkerer because I already have a few support abilities with the other characters, and then you just kind of cry yourself to sleep because now your damage Tinkerer doesn't actually have all the damage cards. They have 3 cards that they'll never actually use. So what I'm kind of debating on is probably, now that my character is level 9 and I'm nowhere near close to retiring still, making it kind of just a house rule, which is kind of house rules are a big thing in a game like this. Just for, to each his own enjoyment, and because this game is easily hundreds of hours long despite being a board game. Just making it so that you can rebuild your character once you hit level 9, choose new cards, and I had to do that for the Sun class anyway because I absolutely hated the hybrid build I was working on, and I was having no luck with it. And then I rebuilt them purely for just being another damage dealer, and it's actually worked out really well. And it's kind of unfortunate because I feel like in this game the best builds are always going to be damage builds, because other than a few scenarios where you have to protect objectives or escort or whatnot, and even for those, generally speaking, your best chance of winning is to take 0 damage. And you take 0 damage when you kill all of the enemies before they even hit you. So, damage builds feel like they're really the only good builds. Maybe not the only fun builds, but the only good builds at the end of the day. And that's a bit of a frustration. Because, like I said, I was really interested in being a gadgeteer tinkerer, and you look at this now, basically I have a bunch of bombs that I nuke people with, but not really any traps, and the only reason why we're using Murderous Contraption is, once again, for the bottom attack. So, now as far as interesting combos, now that I've gotten my spiel out of the way, I'm going to be looking at the items I now have for Tinkerer, and this is going to go up to Prosperity level 5 items, so once again, a little bit of a spoiler here. Now, first and foremost, this is probably the first pick that should have been done at level 1 with your 30 starting gold, but Eagle Eye Goggles. So they give you advantage for an entire attack action, which is basically the entire effect of a card. So this is fantastic with us having these multiple multi-attack actions, because it means that when we draw them and play them, we don't run into issues where, oh, I pulled a null on my attack 4, 5, 6, 7, whatever it is, which feels really garbagey. Now, that kind of goes into the conversation about perks and attack modifiers. So whenever you level up a perk, or level up or get 3 check marks from battle goals, or whenever you retire a character and make a new character, you get a perk. And these perks are affecting your attack modifier deck, which is basically, it's the equivalent of your D20 in this game, but it's not, once again, it's not a D20, obviously. So you can add all of these delicious cards to your attack modifier deck, which increases the effective power of your attack. So, if you get rid of negative cards, if you add positive cards, your attack is shifting towards more likely than not being positive. You still have the ability to miss all the time. You can't get rid of that card, and in fact, I think a couple of decks actually add more negative cards in addition to adding a lot of positive cards. Generally a shift. Now, the way advantage works on this is that when you tap this, now your ink bomb or your net shooter, or your net shooter, because it's up nice in the camera. So for each of these 3 attacks, instead of just flipping a card, you would flip 2 cards. And I use the app for this. So apologies, as I don't actually have a deck in front of me. This is going to be a very bad example, unfortunately, because I don't even have the regular cards in here. I just have the what's it called? I just have like the modifier cards here for the Tinkerer, right? But let's say I do an attack, right? And we're also going to have our 2 times and our bust card. So okay. Oh, you know what? I'm just hold on. Let me stop being an idiot. I'll just pull up the app, which has all of the cards already pre-shuffled in it. Okay, so say I'm attacking somebody off to the side, right? And I'm attacking with advantage. So instead of drawing 1 card, I'm actually going to draw 2. So instead of just pulling a null, I pull a null and I pull a +1. So it takes the better card. There's some points of ambiguity, in which case you just take the first card you drew. But nothing is worse or equal to a null, right? So we know, okay, well, we're definitely going to take the +1 and the heal 2 cell. So now, not only have we not drawn no damage, but we've actually made it so our attack hits them for sure. And now, because we used advantage on our 3 attack, we can actually do that another 2 times. So we do a attack 4 plus a wound, because that's better than just an attack 4. And then, wow, look at that, we also get our 2 times. So advantage is pretty great. Now, there is some caveats with this, though. And that's where you get into rolling modifiers. The way that rolling modifiers work is they have this nice flip as well symbol. And that means that whenever you draw one of them, let me see if I can just get one to show up on the app. It is funny, because I only think I have 2 of them in the Tinkerer deck for the very same reason that it's a lot of multi-target attacks. Yeah, I don't think it's gonna pull up without me jury-rigging it. So now, so if I were to do an attack with advantage and I pull these 2 cards, these 2 cards. Now you just add the effects together, okay? So you put fire in the air, and you deal an additional 1 damage, and you heal your 2 for self. So that's great and all. Problem is, when you get a lot of rolling modifier cards like the Sun class, you have a very high chance of getting a bunch of rolls and then a null. Because what can happen is you can get null, or roll, and then you can pull out a null. And the way advantage works is you add all those rolling modifiers to the last card drawn. You don't get to not get the null. No, you get the null plus all the rolling cards. So if they're like status effects, then that's okay, because maybe you can still stun the enemy or wound them or something. But all your damage is gone. Okay, you deal no direct damage from your attack, and that sucks when we're doing all of our big attacks are losses. So we like advantage. We don't like having rolling modifiers that maybe give us a null. So with the Tinkerer, I stay away from the rolling modifiers as much as I could, other than the 3 muddle cards, just because I was an idiot and chose that very, 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 very early on. But I don't have the Infuse Fire rolling modifier cards. So, I mean, there's not a whole lot more to say. Basically, if I roll advantage, there's like 3 cards out of 27 that might give me modifier that rolls and then a null, but pretty low chance compared to, like I said, Sun's like half rolling modifiers by the time you're done upgrading them. So that's kind of the spiel on like the advantage thing with rolling modifiers, which is very overdone debate in my mind, but an important debate on the forums, because if you're going to pull a null, you're going to pull a null anyway. Having the additional rolling modifiers is nice, because once again you can inflict debuffs on the enemy or whatnot. But yeah, in general, Eagle Eye Goggles, big fan of them, because you turn your multi-attack into like potentially a few negatives and then a null into a pretty good chance of dealing at least plus damage with each of them. And once you get all the perks for the character, then of course your chance just goes up of getting the 2 times or the +3 or whatnot. So Eagle Eye Goggles in the head slot, very big fan of those. The level 5 item that I actually have that I just got, that I would probably recommend, the Robes of Evocation, whatever. So basically during your attack, you can consume an element to add 1 attack to the entire attack action. So once again, great for, basically it's a free minor power potion plus 1 attack to all attacks done as an action. So we do our Noxious Files, we do our Ink Bomb, whatever. Because we don't use elements for anything. We have a couple of friends that like using them. We, as the Tinkerer, we don't use them at all. So being able to consume it to just do that is nice. As far as like, is it better than, I don't know, say like a studded leather armor or something? I feel like, once again, as a full assault class, adding 1 damage to 3 targeted attacks, or even more if you upgrade these cards to add additional hexes, is pretty great. So I stick with that as the chest slot. For the foot slot, I just use wing shoes. It just adds jump. I got them fairly early on. I haven't regretted them. I haven't thought they were life-saving by any means, but they don't suck, so why not, right? Sorry, just leave that place down. Now for the hand slots, you have a couple of interesting options. You could go with some shields. You could go with a couple of debatable options, like for instance, at this level you can get a versatile dagger, and what that does is it means if you do an attack 2 top action, your basic attack, rather than a card effect, you can make an attack 3. So that'd be kind of good if we did absolutely need to melee somebody. But what I am a huge fan of is the volatile bomb. So during your single target attack action, you turn it into 3 hexes instead. Now that is pretty fantastic in my mind, because we can use it with Crankbow. In fact, that's the reason why I got the Crankbow, is because I looked at this and I'm like, what? Instead of doing an attack 6, why don't we do an attack 18? That sounds exciting. And then we do the advantage, and you add some minor power potions. Just good times. So on the topic of that, stamina potion's pretty much a gimme. I do use the nerf version with the -1 use, so it's recover 2 cards. So you can basically, if you attack somebody with non-loss cards, you like that ever happens with this class. But if you absolutely need 2 cards back after you play them and you need them for next turn, they're great. It's great for that. So I generally, because you only have 3 really fast cards, your Toxic Bolt, Net Shooter, and Stun Shot at what is it, 18, 19, 20 initiative. It's good because the remainder cards are a bit slower. So if we look at this from a initiative standpoint, just going to take these off because, well, I mean, minor power potion is kind of self-explanatory, but let's see. These off. Right. So if we look at this from an initiative perspective and you're playing, you have 12 cards, so 6 2-card turns. And if you want to go as fast as possible every round, let's say regardless of circumstance, there are a few times where you want to go slower on purpose, but generally you'd have a turn where you go 18, 19, 20, 36, 47, 61, 61, 47, 36, 20, 19, 18. Right. So once you get after the flamethrower, sub 50 initiative is not great. 20 and less is fantastic. 40 is decent. 50, 60 onwards, it gets flaky. It's not very frequent that you're acting before all the enemies. And sometimes you want them to attack and clump up and whatnot. Most of the time you don't. You want to kill them before they attack you. So with the stamina potion, what you can do is play, say, the top 4 cards and the bottom 4, and then you can recover 18, 19, say your Toxic Bolt Net Shooter, and then do 18. So if you played 8 cards and then recovered 2 of them, then you'd still have these 6 cards. And then what you could do is run 18, 19, and then 47. So once again, shifting faster. And then if you did ever have to go fast or slower, I mean, your bottom 6 cards are all almost 70 and lower, or higher, quote unquote. Like, you're not going to have a problem with actually going slow. You can just flip around. So instead of going 18 and pairing it with a 94, you can go 94 and still have the 18 card, for instance. Yeah, and so that's what, and I mean, just in general, stamina potions are must picks, is the general consensus on the internet. They're very, 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 very good. Yeah, so other considerations as for what I'd like to do, now that I am at a level 9 and I'm saying, okay, well, maybe I'll make deck reshuffling a thing. Maybe I'll make that a lot. Some interesting things that people have mentioned is because the Flamethrower is a melee attack, you can actually apply a couple of silly effects to it. So this is available at a low level. If you use Warhammer with Flamethrower, then it adds stun to the entire attack action of a melee attack. And you could use that to buff Flamethrower to wound and stun them, which is a really good combo. As has been once again pointed out on the internet quite a bit, if you stun and wound somebody, then they take damage. Say you move first before them. Say we're running on our 18, and you move first, you walk up, you waddle up to somebody, and then you wound them. Or say better yet, maybe you know the enemies are very, very, very slow. So what you're going to do is you're going to use lethal injection. You're going to waddle up over to where you need to be. You're going to poison them all. Well, poison the 2 of them adjacent to you. And then you're going to use Flamethrower to get that additional damage from the poison, and then you wound them, and then you stun them, right? So now not only are they taking a lot of damage in one turn, but if you went before them, they're going to be wounded and then stunned. So they take an additional damage each, and then next turn, although they aren't stunned, they're going to take an additional wound damage before they do anything. So as long as they aren't healed by anybody, you're dealing like 2 extra damage for free, quote unquote free, because you have to use Flamethrower and then you'd have to use Warhammer, but pretty nice. That being said, that gets rid of the entire turning Crankbow from a 6 damage into an 18 damage, so it's not going to fly for me. I'm not a fan of that. I'm not going to do that. But on the other hand, now that we have a single one-handed weapon for Tinkerer, we have one other one-handed weapon which we can use, one other slot. And you can get the solo item from the solo scenario for the Tinkerer, but it's a heal item, so once again, we don't care about it. So I was kind of thinking, I was looking through, the deck of what we have, and like most of the melee ones that are spent, which let you reuse them, so spoilers for a few prosperity items. Well, never mind. I'll stick with low prosperity for now. So if I use Warhammer, then I can't use Volatile Bomb. And additionally, it's a consumed item. I only use it once. And it's also only on a melee attack, which means if I punch somebody or if I use Flamethrower, so fairly niche. I can poison, but once again, it's a melee attack, so I'm not going to be using it a whole lot. Plus, it's for a single attack, so it doesn't even combo with Flamethrower. Piercing Bow, people really highly recommend. But because we have a damage build, we can generally, so what this does is it ignores all shield values for the entire attack action for a ranged attack, so it'd be pretty good if you're like wanting to use net shooter on a bunch of wind demons or something. But once again, because this is a damage build, the plan is to just basically blow through all the shields, not ignore them, because once again, Piercing Bow is a two-handed action, and you only get one use out of it, right? You don't get another. That's one for the dungeon, that's it. And I specify that because at a higher prosperity level, let me pull it up. And I don't know what prosperity level this is. Like I said, I did preface this all with saying, up to prosperity level 5. Spoilers. You do get Moon Earring, which is very nice. So what this does is it refreshes all of your spent items. So anything that's a tap, we get to use again. So our Eagle-Eye Goggles, our Robes of Evocation, Winged Boots, get to use them again. Pretty cool. And that is a spent bag item, but for the effects of what it gives you, I think it's pretty good. Now, problem is with the items we've been showing, Piercing Bow is a consumed. Warhammer is a consumed, right? So that means it's not a spent item, right? You don't get to tap it. You don't get to get it back, right? With the Moon Earring, because it's not a spent item, it's a consumed item. There's a difference. And it's like, okay, well, there's another useful item that is about consumed items, and it's the Empowering Talisman. So you can refresh one of your consumed bag items. Oh, that's pretty great. We could use it with Piercing Bow or Warhammer, maybe? No, we can't. Why? Because once again, it is about bag items. That symbol is important. It's for bagged items. So you could get your power potion back. That's fine. You get your stamina potion back. That's fine. No complaints there. In fact, pretty good one to use it on if you were to at all. But Warhammer and Piercing Bow are not bag items. They are hand items. So no luck with that. Can't do that. Additionally, Empowering Talisman is a head item, so that means no goggles. So that also is pretty bad for this assault build we like. So it's like, okay, well, what are our other options for one-handed weapons? And despite like looking through them all a couple of times, nothing really stood out. Like adding wound to a melee is okay. Well, once again, we're not really doing a bunch of melee attacks. Our only melee attack ability is multi-target, so using long spear as a spent two-handed once again sucks. I kind of was thinking, we don't really have a whole lot of good items, a whole lot of good options, but I guess what we could do is, maybe just use a shield, right? Give ourselves a little bit of tanking. But I realized as I lay sweetly sleeping there this morning that we have another really nice one-handed item about turning a single hex attack into multiple, just like we do with Volatile Bomb. But this is for melee, and this is your Battle Axe, right? It's consumed once again, so it's basically the melee variant of Volatile Bomb. But interestingly, it's for single target melee attacks, and we don't really have a whole lot of those, but we do have one. We have our Harsh Stimulants, our level 8 card, right? That I skipped on because I had to go back and pick up Crankbow, or Noxious Vials. But deal 9 damage, take 2 damage, it's a loss. Once again, we can turn that into an 18 with the Battle Axe. So once again, if I were to rebuild the deck, I would absolutely include Harsh Stimulants and do that. Now, like I said earlier, if you have a loss action, you want the other action to be pretty good so you can use it a lot, or you want to just enjoy using your move 2 or attack 2 basic actions. But Harsh Stimulants has a very interesting bottom because all adjacent allies add +2 attack to all their attacks this round, okay, but they also suffer 2 damage. Now, as has been clarified by Isaac, and once again, this is nice because it is a faster card, the buff is a passive. The damage is an active. What that means is that whenever you play this card and flip it, so now it's active for the round, all adjacent allies immediately take 2 damage. But all adjacent allies for the entire round add 2 attack. So that means that if you go really early, which isn't too difficult if you use this, you can deal damage to nobody when nobody's around you, and then your friends can walk up and take advantage of that 2 damage bonus, and that's really nice for a lot of other ranged attackers. Now, it's not let's say fantastic for the case of my current party, because once again I don't really have a whole lot of ranged attackers. But say for instance if we did use, and I'm not going to advocate this because I really like lethal injection, but if you did use chimeric formula and one of your friends were to recover this and then played it, then you can add +2 attack to all of these, which means that you could use Crankbow with Volatile Bomb to deal 8 damage +2, 10 damage to 3 enemies, throw in some power potions, throw in your robes of evocation. You're doing a lot of damage. It's still a loss effect, but it's a pretty juicy one. And then additionally, for other like level ups that I would probably choose differently, I would not choose Tinkerer's Tools or Stamina Booster or Dangerous Contraption, just because really dealing damage seems to always be better. So to that end, I would probably take Auto Turret because it's an attack 2, range 5. It's not fantastic by itself, but you can attack for 10 damage total, which isn't too bad. You draw some modifiers, you can maybe deal 3-4 damage against enemies with poison or wound, or maybe you pull it 2 times on an enemy who is poisoned. Now you're dealing 6 damage, which is pretty great for an action that you can do another 4 times potentially. Interestingly, I believe it was clarified by Isaac. I could be wrong about this, but I believe it was clarified by Isaac that actions can only be performed if the requirements are met for attacks. For moves, you can do them anytime and then not actually move. For optional effects, you can choose not to apply them, so you can actually play Disintegration Beam and then not move and then apply the disarm, or move and then not apply the disarm. Heals are the same way, you can do them whenever. But loot actions and attack actions require the prerequisites to be met, which is an enemy is there or something lootable is there. What that means is that Auto Turret actually would last longer than, say, maybe only 5 rounds if you don't have any enemies within range, or if you specifically position yourself so you don't have any line of sight. Say, that's a highly shielded enemy, an attack 2 isn't going to do a whole lot. You do have a range 5, so it's a pretty good chance you're going to see somebody, but maybe, you scoop out of the room with one of your move 4s so that you don't trigger the Auto Turret charge, because once again, it requires an enemy and line of sight to attack, and therefore, if you can't attack, you can't use a charge. And that, like I said, I believe was clarified by your boy Isaac, but I could be wrong. But if so, that's pretty powerful. So we'd be adding 2 cards to this deck, and if we did go with both of those, and then add a Battle Axe. And honestly, I'm not really sure where we'd add them. I think a lot of people would argue that right now Hook Gun is probably the weakest card here because of the pull. Once again, I am an enormous fan of it. Just for positioning, or pulling people into traps, or getting enemies closer so that your melee summons can destroy them before getting wrecked by ranged, so that your minions don't run forward, whatever the case may be. I'm a pretty big fan of it, and actually on one of the other classes I use, I'm so much a fan of pull, in fact, that I have hooked chain on them, so during your ranged action, add pull 2 to the entire attack action, and I use that exclusively with a top multi-target ability, so I can pull multiple enemies in a position. Once again, that synergizes really well with us as the Tinkerer, because you can spawn in, literally first round, say there's 3 enemies, they're kind of scattered about, they generally don't spawn in a clump all nice and hand-holdy, because that would make it very easy to, you know, use your AoE attacks every time. But what we can do is have that other character pull them into a cluster, and for our first turn, heck, we can pull off our crank bow with Volatile Bomb. And honestly, I do that quite a bit, because your first room tends to be the most difficult, because you can't funnel enemies, you haven't had time to set down traps, and they're all going to act this turn, unlike when you open a door, and you know they're all going to act, but maybe some of them are just going to stand there and heal, maybe some are just going to shield, retaliate, maybe some are going to walk, but they're melee enemies so they don't get to you in time. Yeah, when you spawn in that first room, there's a lot of enemies. They tend to be quite angry at you, and they tend to almost all be within range. So yeah, being able to deal 18 damage on turn 2 for the cost of a spent item, weapon item, which can be redone by them, and a single one of your lost cards in a 12 hand is fantastic, phenomenal. And being able to do that combo by yourself with Hook Gun is not something to be overlooked, but it is still arguably, yeah, probably the weakest card here. I'm not going to say that that's not correct. It does seem a reasonable statement. So that would probably be a good one to replace. Otherwise, maybe Flamethrower if you didn't want to use the Battle Axe. If you didn't want to use the Warhammer, because the Shield 1 effect, self and all adjacent allies, is a pretty weak effect. And you know, you do have the cards in your modifier deck to add a wound anyway. Flamethrower is a little bit more awkward as a carrot, so that's the Shift 6 key on the keyboard, which is that guy right there. Let's call it carrot, C-A-R-E-T, or at least that's what the internet told me. It's a little bit less useful, in my mind, than a V-only attack. Now, that being said, any of these ranged attacks are V or carrot. You can orient them however you want. But generally speaking, if you have 3 enemies, and you're attacking them, and you're a ranged attacker, well, as long as 1 hex is within range, you can attack all of them. So if this is, say, you know, 3 tiles away, and then these guys are 4, well, I can't reach them with my attack 3 action, but if I use a attack 3 multi-hex at range 3, 1, 2, 3, well, I can hit this guy, or I can target this guy, and then I can also happen to hit these guys. So you do have a little bit more of range, technically, with a V, with a forced V, or in our case, a V or carrot interchangeable. And that's better for, you know, especially for the sake of an immobilize, because now if these are ranged enemies, and say they only have a range of 3, these guys are immobilized. They aren't waddling up to me, and now 2 of them are out of range. Maybe 1 of them is within range, but 2 of them are not. Additionally, for us to be in a position with a carrot, especially in melee range, that requires us to be like this. And I guarantee you, those 2 enemies, unless you do stun them or disarm, or they've already moved this turn, or you moved late, or you got something else going on, those 2 enemies are both going to be able to hit you, generally speaking. Especially as the Tinker, we don't really have a whole lot of invisibility shenanigans. You could get an invisibility cloak if you wanted, but I would say it's probably not worth it. You're now within melee range of 2 enemies at using your only melee attack, other than maybe harsh stimulants, right? So once again, the carrot not as good as the V. The bottom is, you know, it's fairly. It's like I said, once again, it's arguably the weakest one. Otherwise, maybe Enhancement Field, because it's only an attack 3. You do have the bottom buff modifier, but kind of falling behind once again. I would say probably keep Enhancement Field, attach a +1 on it to turn this into an attack 4, add a +1 on a Murderous Contraption, turn it into a +5, just because they're one of your few non-loss single target attacks, and when there's only 1 target and you don't absolutely need to lock them down now with a stun, dealing your extra damage is pretty much, you know, 1 extra damage with a good modifier deck can turn into a lot of extra damage, and there's a little bit more flexibility with Enhancement Field than with Flamethrower. That being said, once again, if we're going a full damage build, maybe we think Flamethrower is worth it just for the potential to add 9 damage plus, another 2 rounds of wounds, so like 15 damage. Like it's nothing to shake a stick at for sure. It's pretty good. But just just talking from the viewpoint of potential replacements for cards. And otherwise, I think maybe the only other contender in the deck for like, hey, maybe we should probably work this in, would be actually our level X card, Reviving Shocks. And reason is, attacking multiple enemies is generally better than attacking just one, as is the entire premise of the Tinkerer. But being able to attack them for not a whole lot of damage is okay. You can +1 this, so now you're attacking for 3 damage. And then you can also multi-target, so now you're attacking for 4. Or you're attacking 3 targets for 3, or maybe you use a wound, so now it's technically 4 damage, but it's over 2 turns as long as they don't have shield. Or whatever the case is. Reviving Shocks gives us a little bit more flexibility where it is, once again, multi-target, but they don't need to be clumped up. And it is repeatable. Like, you do get a little bit of flexibility with that once again. And, unless we go on the Flamethrower and we added the hexes and then the poor man's stun with disarm and then, we're able to deal the extra damage with wound, or maybe used Warhammer with Flamethrower and the additional hexes to stun, wound, and damage multiple, like up to 5 enemies at once. Although I would be very suspect that even with the hook gun and the 2 other pulls, you'd be able to get them in a cluster like that very easily. You could do that, but that's very expensive enhancements on one card. Even if you just add the 2 additional hexes, that's 2 enhancements on multi-target cards. But that's 2 enhancements you can't add anywhere else to your deck, because the amount of enhancements you have is limited by the prosperity level of town, and at most it can be 9. So putting 2 or maybe even 3 on just one card is kind of rough, especially if you decide to use, Flamethrower is my signature move. Everybody loves the Flammenwerfer, of course. You get a Warhammer, you stun, you wound, maybe you poison them as well because you enhance it to do poison. You hit 5 enemies, feels good. Okay, but it's still a loss, so you're only doing that once. And even if you get it recovered, you don't have Warhammer anymore. So kind of rough in my opinion to make an entire build about just one card that's a loss. One card that's a non-loss, absolutely do it all the time. One card that's a loss, it's a little more rough. And once again, Reviving Shocks can give us that bit more flexibility. The bottom is still a support action. It's still decent initiative, and the bottom support action is, I'm not going to lie, like, neither of them are great, and you probably don't want to ever use the bottom action Reviving Shocks, but at least it's an option if you do need a burst heal, rather than the Flamethrower, like shield 1 for yourself and anybody beside you. That it's shielding just +1 just really isn't worth it a lot of the time. And especially when you get in those higher level scenarios, level 4, level 5, so on and so forth, you really, there's not a whole lot of enemies that are going to make or break killing you with 1 damage per attack. Snakes, like a group of snakes, maybe, because each of them only attack for 2 or 3 damage, but then the poison kicks it up to 3 or 4, and when you're attacked by 4 or 5 guys for a small ounce of damage, adding a shield reduces that by 5 or 6 damage per turn. But still, you're really limited with the actual viability of the supportability on Flamethrower. Whereas Reviving Shocks, I'm not going to lie, it's not any better, but the top action is, maybe a bit more spammable, which is kind of what we want as a class that is mostly focused on using all of our abilities as losses as soon as the situation presents itself. Now, just to kind of wrap this up, because I think I've talked about everything I wanted to talk about and then some. So I'm going to leave these cards on here just as a point of, if you want to kind of look through and see maybe what you would prefer to replace. or maybe, you know, make an entirely different deck. Just while I'm wrapping up here. If I can find where, but there we go. All right, so like I said, those would probably be the three I would consider phasing in, just for the sake of more damage in, because honestly, like with Harsh Stimulants, like you do get a bit more flexibility with your bottom action if you aren't planning on just moving this turn. You do have the ability to use the battle axe then instead of having pretty much any other one-handed weapon, which is not useful generally. Like this does give you a bit more flexibility as a damage. But last thing I'd like to talk about is just spent items in general, because I know I was talking about, you know, goggles and robes of evocation and whatnot, and I did have that lengthy little component on advantage. It's interesting. Most people on Reddit and Board Game Geek and whatnot are going to tell you, oh, you know, for the Quattro Tinkerer, yeah, goggles are okay, but because you're not resting a whole lot since you have so many cards, you're not going to get them back a whole lot. And yes, that's true. Absolutely, that's true. Don't get me wrong. Even when you're using a lot of losses, you're probably not going to be long resting a whole lot with the Tinkerer, just because you have 6 turns before your first like necessary rest anyway. You know, you can get the stamina potions, you can have your friends maybe recover your cards for you, but the difference between pulling a using like 2, so let's go back to using the example of the crank bow, right, or maybe even the Harsh Stimulants. You know, you want to end the show with a bang and like one hit 2 guys. You know, using your minor power potion, your major power potion, maybe using your robes of evocation, maybe they're already poisoned, you're popping volatile bomb and using a crank bow, and you're like, oh man, I'm gonna hit these guys for like 12 damage apiece, feeling pretty juicy, and then you pull a null, you're gonna feel pretty awful about that, right? Like going from 12 damage to 0 is just not good. And like once again, with the rolling modifiers, there's still the chance of it happening, don't get me wrong, but if it were me, I would, anytime I'm using one of those absolute big slam-a-jam, the Harsh Stimulants and oh my god, and crank bow especially, when you're turning them to multi-target, putting all the buffs into them that you can, you know, I just want to be on the safe side. And if you want to be on the quote-unquote, like the safest side you can be, that would be basically not choosing the muddle or infuse flame perks with the Quattro Tinkerer. Because then, if you have no rolling modifiers, and you have all the other perks which get rid of the -2 and all but one of the -1s, really the worst thing that you can pull is a null and then a -1. And 12 -1 is a lot better than 12 -12. The only other way that you could actually miss the attack is if you have a bunch of curses in your deck. In which case, you know, if you're pulling that, then once again, you'd have to get 2 curses or a curse and a null. Which, you know, depending on if you're the person with all 10 curses in your deck, then it sucks to be you for having so many loss attacks. But, you know, overall, you get rid of the muddle or the infused fire, and all you have is at worst 1 null, and then you go at advantage. Like, you can't mess up, and you can deal a lot of damage that way. And the goggles is maybe sometimes the difference between that. And I mean, my other question would be, okay, well, what item would you use instead for headgear slot? Because, like I said, there is the option of maybe using the empowering talisman, but like otherwise, like Hawkhelm, adding range is in, because we have a lot of mobility with our move 4. Very rare that we need 1 extra range on our attacks. And let me see, I'm just looking through the other head slot gear, head gear available, at least at the point I am. You know, there's a card that if you move 4 or more per turn, then you add damage to the attack. Like, okay, well that's cool, but it's only for melee attacks. So despite us moving a lot, we don't benefit from that. We have the Heavy Bassinet, which is the level Prosperity 5, immune to stun and muddle. Like, okay, I guess, but add negative cards to your hand, and like, how often are you as the backlines character getting stunned and muddled? Hopefully never. We have Hawkhelm, as I was talking about, add 1 to the entire action. Well, once again, when we're using all these hexes, we don't care about adding +1 range to the entire attack action. We just need to be within range of 1 hex. Otherwise, Amulet of Life, maybe for that nice heal. This is, when I was playing a support deck mostly, this was actually pretty nice because anytime I get poisoned or wounded, instead of having to burn a heal on myself, I can just use the amulet, heal myself. Or maybe, if I'm long resting, I turn that in from a heal 2 to a heal 3. Like, that was nice, but not anymore. I wouldn't vouch for it. Iron Helmet, honestly, supremely underrated card in my opinion. If you're on the front lines as a melee attacker, any 2 times at the level 3, 4, 5 is going to deal a lot of damage. It's not uncommon for enemies to attack for 3, 4, 5 damage. 10 damage with the 2 times is rough. And nullifying that, you aren't going to nullify it, sorry, but you are preventing them from doubling it, so they will go with an attack 5. It's infinitely better than an attack 10 when you have less than 10 health. Right? That's the difference between burning a card or not. And if not, then 10 damage is still a lot for most characters. They don't have 3 or 4 shield, and at most you have 26 health. So 10 damage is a lot. 5 is a lot as well, but it's not a third or more at your health bar. And then otherwise, the only other option for headgear slots, at least for what I have unlocked, is the Eagle Eye Goggles. And like I said, it's just a very, very nice, easy pick for me. So for other options for gear, for your armor, if you didn't want to go with Robes of Evocation, probably I'd say studded leather, which is the upgrade to the normal leather armor, or if you don't have that, then just leather armor. It does give you a little bit of, once again, it's a spent item, so same debate as this entire time. But on the off chance that you are targeted by attack, you give them disadvantage. The enemies don't have rolling modifiers, so it's not like they can pull a rolling modifier 2 times, which can happen with disadvantage. It's kind of funny. People like poking fun at that on the forums because, once again, with advantage, you can pull a rolling and then a null. With disadvantage, you ignore any rolling, regardless of if the rolling is better or worse than the actual card. So you can pull a rolling +1 and then a 2 times. It's like, okay, well, you get rid of the rolling, so you deal double damage as your worst card with your disadvantage. Oh. But so enemies can't do that. So making them attack at disadvantage is always a benefit, other than if they have a bunch of curses, then maybe you pull 2 curses, now only one of them is used and the other one is wasted, quote unquote. But I'd say I'd still use it for that, because once again it also increases the chances of playing a curse if the first one wasn't. But because you aren't attacked very often, like I said, I phased out the leather personally, just because, so it's nice because, once again, you're only resting once in a blue moon, but you probably only need it once in a blue moon. But I'd rather just add the damage when I'm doing multi-target attacks. And then for other chest options, you have your heavy armors, but they all add -1s, which you really don't want. You have your Cloak of Invisibility, which is nice in a pinch, don't get me wrong with that, but I feel like you aren't going to see a whole lot of use for it, once again, as the person in the back, just lobbing nades and whatnot at them. And then your other option is Cloak of Pockets. Now that is actually an interesting choice to me because, personally, I've taken the major stamina potion, I've taken the major and the minor power potion, and I did actually take a minor heal. So with the Cloak of Pockets, you do get the benefit of adding more, so you can maybe get another minor heal for getting rid of poison or wound. Maybe get we already have, at least in my case, I already have the heal minor, so maybe add a heal major so that if I do get poisoned, then I can heal it with the minor and then heal my missing health with the major. Maybe adding a minor mana potion if your friends are feeling like they're missing one. An element like they absolutely need an element this turn or next turn, and you don't really have any way to generate things other than Flamethrower and Toxic Bolt. And Flamethrower is kind of a loss that, like I said, I'm debating pulling anyway. But really, like, you don't really have a whole lot of other options anyway. Like, Moon Earring absolutely would be the most logical slot, but I currently have room for that, so adding that isn't too difficult. The Minor Mana is, like I said, it's good for like a teamworky thing most of the time. If people consume elements, they have a way of building them or burning them just fine. We already have both power potions. We can't use another one. We already have a healing potion. Stun Powder is interesting, but it's just adding it to a single attack, so it's stunned to a single attack. So once again, it's in my opinion, it's a fairly weak option. Because stun is the be-all end-all of debuffs for enemies. Like, hey, you don't get a turn is pretty powerful, but at the same time, it's for a single attack. We're mostly focused on multi-attacks. You're probably better just using an item that increases your damage so you can just outright kill the guy, right? Like I said, Moon Earring, obvious choice. Maybe getting some of those summons, the item summons, but like for the money. And as a non-summoner class, like, it's not really great in my opinion. Otherwise, like, an interesting one that I just got at level 5 would be maybe this guy, the Ring of Haste. You can immediately perform one bottom action of a card, but I wouldn't say there's a whole lot of bottom actions that we have here that are make or break. Maybe Disintegration Beams, Disarm, maybe Murderous Contraptions, extra attack. Maybe Noxious Vials, but it's not really an end-of-turn thing. It's more of a setup for another heavier attack. So Ring of Haste is kind of interesting, but 2 out of my 3 other classes that I'm currently playing, because like I said, I solo and there's the group of 4, really, really love Ring of Haste, so Tinkerer doesn't really have that as an option. And once again, for me to pick the Ring of Haste and the Moon Earring would require me to take the Cloak of Pockets, which means I can't add damage to my attacks, which would be benefited with having the Moon Earring, because then I could do that multiple times per rest. It's just kind of all fused together. I'm not going to say I'm an expert at the game by any means. I'm not going to say that I, have all the items unlocked or I thought of every possibility. Like I said, I haven't even touched enhancements other than when characters retire, just for the sake of my characters are all friggin' broke. But just kind of my thoughts on what a damage tinkerer, an assault tinkerer, however you'd want to call it, would function. Grenadier Tinker is probably the best name for what we've got going on with all the bombs and the Flamethrower and the Crankbow, which does 18 damage on turn 1. That is a personal favorite. I'm so happy I picked that when I saw Volatile Bomb. Honestly, phenomenal. Anyway, so I think that wraps that up. Obviously, I have 3 other characters in front of me, which I could talk for a long time about as well, but I think this, hour-ish, hour and a half? I'm going to have to check when I turn the mouse back on. But I think this kind of covers everything I wanted to talk about this one specific class. I, of course, want to actually make these changes and then go try this with the new Harsh Stimulants Battle Axe combo. I think that's pretty much everything I have to talk about on the Tinkerer without actually, once again, going through and talking about the other classes. So let's see if I can check. Yeah, hour and a half. 1 hour, 33 minutes, 27 second video. But yeah, that's everything for the Grenadier Tinkerer. So hopefully that you found this enlightening and or entertaining. And hopefully I haven't had the audio muted this entire time. Otherwise, that would be painful.